On today's show, we are delving into the game of Jacob Rombach, a physical shutdown defenseman from the USHL, who's one of my favorite draft eligibles in the league this season, especially because of his high-end breakout game.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we're looking at one player in particular in our Spotlight series here, looking at individual draft eligible prospects here leading up to the 2025 draft. And on today's episode, we have Jacob Rombach, a 6'6" left shot defenseman who's a pretty good skater, very physical, and has a lot of qualities that NHL teams are going to be salivating over in the late first and early second round. So we'll be delving into his tools in the first segment, his mental habits and intelligence in the second, and finally we'll wrap up the show by looking ahead at where he might go on draft day, which team might want to pick him, and which NHL players play similarly to him. But before we dive into the episode, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So let's dive straight into the episode here. So who is Jacob Rombach? If you've been listening to this show for a longer period of time, you've heard me talk about Rombach a decent amount here on the podcast. But if it's a new name to you, Rombach is a 6'6", 201-pound left shot defenseman playing with the Lincoln Stars in the USHL. He's a University of Minnesota commit in the NCAA, where he'll be going next season. And this year, he played 57 regular season games with Lincoln, scoring 3 goals and 18 points in that span and having exactly 1 penalty minute per game throughout. And he was a plus 29. We don't love plus minus here typically on the podcast, but I think it can be quite indicative in certain situations. On the one hand, it shows how strong of a team Lincoln has been. And on the other hand, it shows just how much that ice tilts in his favor when Rombach is out there. And it's quite significant. He's very good at killing plays, limiting chances, containing opponents to the outside. And on top of that, the retrieval game is something quite special, as we'll be exploring here today. But in the first segment, we always like to look at the individual tools, the skating, the puck handling, the shooting, playmaking, and physicality. These aspects are things that are quite important in projecting a player, but still kind of surface level. So we like to start off the show with that and then go a bit deeper as the episode goes on. So among the overall tools, what is the strongest here for Rombach? I think it's very, very clear. It's the physicality. You don't have to look much beyond the stat sheet to notice that. He is a huge customer at 6'6", over 200 pounds, and he uses that physicality to just create constant advantages at the USHL level. He's a very physically inclined player, but this isn't physicality in chasing hits and getting like the really big hit to like roar up the crowd. It's pinning players against the board, smothering plays, killing them, and being very, very effective in squeezing himself, like wedging himself between opponent and puck, getting the puck onto his stick, and then making a very quick, intelligent first play with possession to move the play up ice and towards the opposition goal. He's very much a guy that kind of boomerangs the play a bit, right? Like he likes to force a takeaway, kill a play defensively, and then immediately send things back the other way. And it's always this just launching of accurate, intelligent, quick plays in transition that makes him so projectable to the modern NHL game. So the physicality is a big part in that because it allows him to be the play killer that he is. He has good stick work, certainly, but the physicality, the ranginess, like with that 6'6" wingspan, he can just mop up things in a massive radius. He's a really, really difficult guy to kind of get around at the USHL level. You kind of have to go through him. You have to kind of initiate contact in some way because he's mobile enough as well to match footwork quite well off the rush. Explosive first couple of steps to close gaps aggressively. A lot of tools here that are very interesting for a big left shot defenseman. But the passing ability is also quite good. This isn't passing in the sense of offensive creation and playmaking and just like really impressive creativity in making something out of nothing. It's just consistently finding the right play very quickly and hitting it with precision. Doing that consistently under pressure on retrievals with his back to play, back to opponents, doing it with a right along the wall and still being able to muster a pretty good exit out of it. This is a player who's very adaptable in the breakout and is very difficult to pressure. He's very composed in those areas, and I think that the strong passing ability, the precision, the confidence behind those outlet passes is what makes all of that tick so nicely. The skating's also an element of a positive, I would say. He probably projects as an average NHL skater for his size, but he's quite fluid on his feet. There's still, I think, some runway with the skating because there's still some inconsistencies in his stride mechanics. Like later on shifts, later on games, things can break down a little bit more in his form and his posture. But the power he has, the fluidity he can move with, the crossovers, all of these are elements I think could project to being above NHL average for his size as well. So the skating is maybe a 5.5 grade. It's slightly above average in terms of projection. As it is right now, it's closer to average, but there are elements that should be able to see some real improvements over the course of time. But the shot is probably the tool to not write home about. It's pretty heavy, but it's pretty erratic as well in my viewings. He's not the most like precise shooter for rebounds or for tips in the world. Sometimes he just kind of like whacks the puck in the direction of goal, but there isn't always the most forethought, and the actual tool itself, the shot, I don't think is the biggest threat at this stage in his development. But he has such a big body, so much weight behind his shot, with some like just mechanic work on the release, on the different types of releases, whether it be a one-timer or a wrist shot or a snapshot. I think these are things that he can still work on and improve, but they're never going to be like a highlight of his game. But it doesn't need to be. You don't need your big stay-at-home defensive defenseman to be like your finisher on a power play unit or anything along those lines. So I think that for the style that Rombach's going to play in the NHL, the shot's perfectly fine. It's just not going to be something that really like creates all that much, but the habits could improve, and with that, the effectiveness of the shot and the use of the shot as a playmaking tool could certainly still see some real improvements. But to wrap up the first segment, let's talk about the handling skill. And the handling, I think, is rather pragmatic rather than creative. Like, again, he's not a guy that's going to like dissect defensive structures, attack defenders head on with pace and try to dangle through them and break their ankles. But he's a player who can solve individual waves of pressure pretty well with his hands. He places the puck in places where only he can then reach it. It's not necessarily the most like deft puck touches that you've ever seen in the world, but he uses his physicality well to protect possession, and he has other abilities as well to make him stronger on puck than just pure handling skill, because he doesn't really just need that in order to be a guy who can take control of possession and be very difficult to take the puck off of. And he already does that most of the time in Lincoln. And while he hasn't been playing like all that much on the top pairing this season, it's been mostly second pairing, sometimes third pairing minutes for Jacob Rombach on a very strong Lincoln Stars team. I think he's still been able to really showcase the variety of tools he has. And there's a lot to like here. There's a lot to like kind of dig your teeth into if you're an NHL like development staff. There are different paths you can kind of like work with this player, whether you want him to be like your just physical play killing stay-at-home defender, or you want to maybe work a little bit more on that breakout game and getting him a bit more into a slight two-way, I guess, kind of impact on the ice. But those are the tools here for Jacob Rombach. In the next one, we're going to talk about more about the mental side of the game, the intelligence, the habits, how he plays on the ice. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 2025 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Wi-Fi 6 and 6E and auto low latency mode, advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds that you need in order to stay competitive. With 4K streaming, watch over 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and far more. Head to amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd generation. All right, let's dive right back into the episode here with Jacob Rombach's habits, his toolkit, how his overall abilities mesh together. And this is a guy that I think has a lot of strengths on this side. If we're talking about the habits, I think that the first things we have to look at are really in the breakout because it is a refinement of habits in that part of the game. This is a guy who just layers a lot of scanning. He's constantly checking his shoulders, looking at his surroundings, creating a mental map of the ice when he goes for a retrieval. Has a pretty good first little shoulder shimmy that he can do to shake off one checker and then go back the other way. And he's a guy that's just able to manipulate a bit there on retrievals, which you don't see very often from 6'6" USHL draft eligible defensemen, that they're physical, play killing guys who can also deceive and make intelligent plays with foresight and anticipation on retrievals to just consistently get the puck out of the defensive zone into the neutral zone with control. That first pass is also really quite intelligent. He uses look-offs and uses his eyes as well to make checkers go for one pass, and then he goes the other. He can go for cool little no-look passes that are quite precise. And overall, this is a guy that has quite a lot of details in the way that he breaks the play out of his own end. And these are things that he's going to need in order to become that above average breakout defenseman in the NHL someday, which I think he will be able to in time, in a second pairing, third pairing capacity. This is a player that could just be a real specialist in terms of being physical, matching footwork well at the rush, just being suffocating as a rush defender. Against the cycle, being very physical, being able to box out, push attackers away from his goaltender's sight lines, and just being a real pest to play against in that area, and just a really big guy again who can push off most people in those positions. And I think that he's also going off to a really good development program there at the University of Minnesota for his toolkit. It's a program that has seen a big exodus in talent here recently, with players like Sam Renzel going to the NHL, a bunch of forwards as well, like Oliver Moore and Jimmy Snuggerud as well. But there are openings here on the blue line for Minnesota that I think Rombach is going to fit in quite nicely. Whether it's in his freshman season already that he's playing in top four capacity or more in time, I think that he's a player that's going to take some really big steps in his development at the college level, where he's going to be more challenged physically, is going to be forced to be a bit more pacey and aggressive in his defensive implications, but still has all of these tools at his disposal to be a really, really solid, both play killing and also breakout defenseman. But in transition as a puck carrier, there's some interesting flashes with Rombach. I think that the actual top hand is quite unlocked as a puck handler, so he's able to curl the puck around opponents. And there have been a couple sequences this year that have been really, really pretty in terms of him just dangling past an opponent, a single opponent. You can't really do it with two or three, but with a single layer pressure, he can solve it in a creative and pretty way as well, that I think is going to be interesting to watch at the NCAA level, of a big defensive defenseman, well, primarily defensive defenseman, who can dangle a little bit and is a strong passer of the puck. There's so much to like here with this player, but with those habits as well, I think that physicality is a really big thing to talk about. And in terms of the physical habits, matching footwork off the rush, he keeps tight gaps, and he's always a stick first defender. He layers stick then body. He's not a guy that just goes to chase a hit. If he's able to get a puck, do something for possession to gain it with his stick, he's going to try that first before using his body. So he's a player that I think is quite projectable in that sense, unlike other big defensemen we've seen recently, like the Gabriel Eliassons of the world from last year's draft, who went to Ottawa in the second round, who is just pure violence and just hits anything that moves. Rombach's a lot more cerebral with when he commits to implicating himself physically and taking himself out of position to kill a play, because there's always an element of risk with that. The puck could bounce off, and then you have a 2-on-1 going the other way, and Rombach is in no man's land, right? So he's a guy that I think manages the risk quite well, and that takes intelligence, that takes composure, and it takes a degree of awareness of the situation as well, of what is in front of him and coming down towards him. But in the offensive zone, he's largely just a play connector. He's a guy that can make a really good pass, as we've mentioned, right? He's a precise passer of the puck. He can connect play between two different flanks in the offensive zone quite effectively, hasn't been seeing really power play minutes here this season for, I think quite clear reasons. He's not the most inherently creative or dynamic defenseman with the puck on the stick, but he's still able to pass the puck and connect play quite nicely. And in terms of like attacks on the cycle and sealing the wall and making sure the puck stays in the offensive zone, containing possession there's some real elements of strength here with Rombach too. And those are things that are very important at the National Hockey League level in terms of sustaining offensive pressure, of having a defenseman that's able to just mop things up and stop exit attempts really, really easily in their tracks, whether it's a lobbed puck that he can jump up and catch with his hand, or a player trying to exit towards him. He's able to just smother play into the boards, pin that play, get the puck out, and keep it there in the offensive zone. So a lot of these habits that are especially important during the NHL playoffs, that are even more valued in the eyes of NHL teams and general managers at this time of year than usual. And I think that he's a player that's going to see his draft stock rise as a result of these qualities. He's such a projectable player. He's going to play NHL minutes in some capacity, whether it's going to be as a third pairing shutdown guy or a second pairing, more two-way impact player remains to be seen. But that second pairing potential, I think, makes him a very clear top 40 talent in this year's draft. You don't see many projectable players with top 6 or top 4 upside available beyond that point of the draft. And this year is even more so the case. We have distinct drop-offs in talent around 25th overall range this year, where you're going from the more likely bets to the bigger long shots, the bigger swings. And Rombach is still one that straddles that combination of upside and floor. And I think that should make him a pick late on day one of the draft, with what we've seen NHL GMs valuing and NHL scouting departments valuing in recent seasons, and just overall the styles of players that go a bit higher than they're projected to. Because at the moment, Jacob Rombach is projected as a second to early third round talent. He's mainly being ranked between 36th overall and like 81st overall, which is a pretty big range there going into the third round. And I can see a bit why. He's not the most flashy player, right? Like, he's a simple, straightforward, bread and butter guy, but who does one thing that very few players of his profile can do at this level, at this age, and that is the breakout game. So there's a true special quality beyond just the physicality with this guy that I think puts him a clear step above a lot of the other big, hulking, physical defensemen available in the draft this year. In the USHL, you have guys like Sean Barnhill and Maceo Phillips who kind of fit into those slots, but they lack this type of separating ability that Rombach has that could really make him a second pairing guy in the NHL. Those two other guys, quite simple, but they lack a true special element, which will likely restrict them to a third pairing capacity if they hit the NHL. But that wraps up the habits section, the intelligence section here for Jacob Rombach. In the final segment, we're going to be looking ahead at where he might go on draft day, which teams would be good fits, which NHL players play like him, and overall what his ceiling and floor truly are. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live playoff game in the NHL, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's all next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever before. Game Time is the easiest and fastest way to grab playoff tickets. Even for those must-see matchups, prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows a total cost upfront, so there's never any surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you panoramic seat view, so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's wrap things up here in the final segment, talking about Jacob Rombach and looking ahead a bit at what might be happening in the coming months and years for this player. Starting things off, where is he going to go on draft day? This is the big question, of course, but I think that he's going to be a player who gets drafted between 24th and 45th overall. I think it's a bit of a wider range. Maybe you could even like lower that to like 38th overall. So say like 24 to 38, I think is probably where he's going to fall on draft day. So really late first, early second round, but not beyond that. I think he's too physical. He's too strong in the breakout to fall beyond like the 38th overall mark. With just how he plays the game of hockey and how NHL teams like to draft, he's a quintessential like player to go in that range on draft day. And this year's class has a lot less certainty beyond that 25th overall cutoff. So a player of this profile is only going to become even more enticing as a result of that. And I think there's a lot of teams in this range that would be very interested in a player like Rombach. At 24th and 25th overall, you have the Philadelphia Flyers potentially going back to back with Edmonton and Colorado's draft picks there. We'll see how the playoffs unfold, but potentially back-to-back selections there for the Flyers. I think Rombach is straight up their alley. He's physical, he's violent, he's a really effective defensive presence that I think would be a stabilizing force for more leaning pieces like Jamie Drysdale, for instance. I think Rombach would be a really good complement for a player like Drysdale on a second pairing longer term. But beyond that, you have a lot of other teams I think that would also really like a player of this mold. First and foremost, the Winnipeg Jets. We'll see where they pick, but it's going to be late in the first round, obviously, with just how good and dominant they've been here this season. But I think Rombach fits in nicely. We've seen how much they've liked Logan Stanley over the years, but Jacob Rombach, as if Logan Stanley could make better decisions, were a bit less violent and were very strong in the breakout, which is a much better version of Logan Stanley, in my opinion, and a player that could play up the lineup rather than just being sheltered on the bottom pairing. So I think that Winnipeg would be a very interesting landing spot for a player like Jacob Rombach. And finally, if we're looking in the early second round, a team that stands out is the San Jose Sharks. They need some more defensive stability, and they have a lot of left shot guys, but Rombach can play on his offside on the right. I've seen him be pretty effective at still stealing the wall on his weak side. And overall, he's a guy that with his range, with his mobility, is just able to play a really solid brand of hockey, no matter whether he's on the right or the left-hand side. And I think San Jose would be a really good fit for a profile like that. And we actually discussed this in an episode that was posted yesterday. I can link it down below in the description, which I did together with JD Young of Locked On Sharks, talking about 3 potential fits in the late first, early second round for the team. And Jacob Rombach was one of those, alongside Cole McKinney and Václav Nestershil. But moving on, what is the absolute ceiling here for Jacob Rombach? I think that if he hits his true ceiling, his true upside, that he's going to be a top 4 insulator for a dynamic offensive defenseman who's able to support, obviously, in the breakout and is a very strong rush defender. I think these are things that Rombach does very, very well. And these are also elements that dynamic, undersized offensive defensemen often struggle with significantly more in terms of being that aggressive play killer, smothering plays against the boards, just being a very initiative and active in the defensive implications, and still being able to connect on very strong plays in the breakout, having the intelligence, the awareness, the quick thinking to make these quick breakout plays to create advantages on the counterattack, which most dynamic offensive defensemen really love doing. Rombach would be a very good complement to that kind of style to just launch play right back up the ice via his defensive pairing mate. In terms of floor, I still see this player as an NHLer through and through. He's so physical, he's intelligent, the mobility is strong and still has room to grow. This is a guy that's just going to be a bottom shutdown pairing D, I think, in terms of, at the very least, this is a player that's going to be reliable and solid towards the bottom of your lineup. And it might take him longer to get there, right? If we're talking about floor, maybe it takes 5 or 6 years to kind of refine and crystallize into this type of player. But I still think that he's a guy that has a lot of value here on draft day, even if that floor is perhaps a bit of a boring kind of piece for an NHL lineup. It's such an important one. We're seeing this in the playoffs. Big physical bottom pairing defensemen, there are riots in the streets when they're not dressed in these really intense playoff matches. We saw it with the Montreal Canadiens and Arbor Xhekaj not coming into the first 2 games. There was a lot of frustration around that. I think Jacob Rombach could be a much more stable kind of guy with less violence, less fighting in his game, but still a guy that's able to ramp things up in the postseason. In terms of player comps, this is interesting. Like, the first name I came up with is not perhaps the most intuitive, and that's a bigger version of Brett Kulak that came to mind for me. Brett Kulak, the player, I've always loved watching play. He's so intelligent, he's reliable, he's solid. He makes pretty much everyone alongside him better when he's plugged at their side. And what he does so well is defend the rush to a very high level with aggressive stick work, strong skating, and overall just being very controlled in his defensive implications. And in the breakout, he's also a player that makes just consistently strong, intelligent plays rather than trying to go for the absolute best play available, like the Hail Mary stretch pass. He's just constantly making very good plays that are available, and he's hitting them with precision and just getting the puck out with control. That reminds me a lot of how Jacob Rombach operates in the breakout. So that's my player comp here in terms of perhaps especially the defending in the breakout game. In terms of physicality, maybe like a Joel Edmondson kind of guy, but way better kind of a skater than Edmondson ever has been. And he contains play just so effectively. He can play quite a gritty style with some cross checks to the back, but overall, he's a player that I've really enjoyed watching this season. But if you've watched him, I'd love to hear from you. What play reminds you the most of Jacob Rombach? I don't think I've actually nailed the best player comp here for this player. But that wraps things up here for the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. If you're watching on YouTube, please let me know down below what you thought about the episode, what your thoughts are on this player specifically, where you think he should land, and what his overall upside is. I'd love to hear from you down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the pod. And for your second listen today, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you can possibly want to know to build yourself a sustainable and competitive fantasy roster. But that's everything here. Thanks so much for listening. I'm your host, Sebastian Hine, and I look forward to catching you tuning in again very, very soon.